about what goes on with the staff and the treasury are listed over there as well. Let's talk about that program. There are 1 million people here in the state of Colorado in the private sector that do not have access to retirement savings at work. And guess what? As a result, they're not saving for retirement. This is 40% of the private sector workforce. 40% of the private sector workforce. Now, I'm a para member, and I work hard to defend para and build para up. Any para members in here? Yes, indeed. So we want to be sure that people have a dignified and sustainable retirement, and the people that serve the public as public employees deserve that. But we also, I believe everybody deserves a sustainable and dignified retirement. And so, what we're working on here is an effort to lift up people in the private sector that don't have access to retirement savings. Now, if a company has a retirement savings program, they're not affected by this. This is just companies that don't have a program, and we often hear it's really difficult to set something up like this. And so we got a bill passed in 2020 to start this process. There's a board that I chair that's setting the policies, and they're the fiduciaries. I'm a fiduciary for this. It's going to be a public-private partnership. So we're going to hire a record keeper, huge record keeper company to track all the money and the money coming in from payroll deduction. We're going to hire fund managers in the private sector to manage money. But we want to be sure that people have a consistent retirement savings program so that when they're ready to retire, they can do so. They can do so comfortably. We did a study in 2019 to come up with the million people number, and at the same time we actually quantified what would happen if we don't do something. What's the cost to the state of doing nothing? Well, if people aren't prepared for retirement, they either have to work longer, or if they can't work longer, they end up on safety net services. They'll be on Medicaid as well as Medicare. They'll maybe be on housing supports, and maybe they'll be on food security supports. And these are all taxpayer-funded services. And we actually quantified that and determined that over the next 15 years, that's going to be an $18 billion bill to the taxpayers. That's B with a billion with a B. That's a lot of money. And I can tell you, after serving on the Joint Budget Committee, our state's budget does not have that kind of tax revenue to deal with that. So why don't we figure out a different way? Why don't we actually put a hand out, but allow people to pull themselves up through their own work, their own savings. These are accounts that are tagged to them, not to the business. And when they move from one job to another, their retirement account travels with them. And so, the company doesn't have to do very much except set up payroll deduction, and then workers start to save. And if they move to a different company, they just start up payroll deduction there and continue to save. So the goal is, I want to get savers. I'm really agnostic about how that happens. I know that there are other companies that provide retirement savings programs, and if people want to pursue that, more power to them. I'm fine with that, as long as we get savers and they're sustainable in retirement. We are doing something that's kind of interesting, first in the nation. Our statute allowed us to form multi-state partnerships, and so we actually have a partnership agreement that we formed with the state of New Mexico. New Mexico has a program that when we get more savers, we actually lower the fees for them and for us. So we're reaching out to other states as well, but we already have a partnership agreement with New Mexico, and we're going to continue to work on that. We're going to pilot this in October, and the board voted today that we're going to fully launch on January 1st, 2023. So this is coming pretty quickly, and I think it's going to be a real help for everyone. Just really wanted to lay that out there so people knew that. A little talk about para. I'm not the spokesperson of para. I serve on one of 16 trustees, but I'm not the spokesperson. So I always want to qualify that. At the same time, I also want you to know that board meetings are open. So they're in the deck when you get it. There'll be a link over, and you can actually join those public meetings of para by Zoom, and you can participate. If you want to make comments, you can do that. It's an open public meeting. Para is solid. We're working with Rep. Byrd on a bill to restore the lost direct payment, $225 million direct payment to para that they had to not do in the economic downturn. They had to cut a ton of money out of the budget in 2020 to balance it. But now the revenues have come back in. We want to restore that payment plus the lost earnings that that money would have made in the portfolio. And so we're pushing that bill forward, working with her to push the bill forward. I wrote an editorial supporting it as well. So I always want to point out, people say, well, Para's got funding problems. We know that. We passed a bill in 2018 called Senate Bill 200 to get Para back on a sustainable funding source to get funded fully in the year 2048. So 30 years out. And people go, is it doable? And the answer is absolutely. This is a graph. You know, I'm a math teacher. I've got to have a graph. Gotta have a graph. And this is hard to see, I think, at a distance, but when you get the deck, you'll get it. The graph runs from 1970 to 2009. It was created by nonpartisan staff at the Capitol. So this is not, you know, partisan. This is just staff that took Para's funding numbers and put them into a graph. And it starts in 1970, and you see the graph trend up from 60% in 1970 all the way up to 105% funded in the year 2000. How many of you knew that Para was overfunded slightly in the year 2000?
No.
The talking you do, good. Not very many people do. But most people just think that it's been a sorry story forever, and it hasn't been. Para's been around since before Social Security. And so it's been well managed over many, many years, but there's been some bumps in the road. You can see a big one starting in the year 2000, and the graph ends at 2009, but I will tell you the funding level hasn't creeped up much yet. But just like in 1970, where it took a while to gain some steam before it started to go up, Senate Bill 200 is going to gain that steam, and we will do this again. It's not theory. I always show this graph to reinforce this is not theory when we say we can get fully funded by the year 2048 in 30 years. We've done it before through multiple recessions. I know we can do it again. We just have to make smart decisions and manage well. Just want to bring this up. We're working on a program that is a senior and active military deferral program. Now, this is not the senior homestead program, which exempts part of your property taxes. This is a program that allows you to defer, actually take out a loan or a lien against your house if you want to. I'm not sure it's the right program for every person, but it's an option. And I certainly would prefer to see somebody do this instead of not eat or not get medicines, because their fixed income is stretched too thin and they can't pay the property taxes. What's interesting is this has been around for a while, and I wanted to expand it, and then last year the legislature passed a bill to expand this deferral program to all property taxpayers in the entire state. So we are scrambling quickly, and we are ramping this up. We're changing the whole program so that it'll be ready January 1st, 2023 to be receiving applications for deferral of property taxes coming from all corners of the state. It's going to be a big lift.
Is that part of a program to avoid evictions?
Yeah, certainly could be. You know, I mean, anybody that doesn't pay their property tax, you know, that goes into a process that the assessor would know a lot, and the treasurer at the county level would know a lot about, right? So we're really trying to make sure that there is sustainability for people. Some people just defer for a year and then pay it back. Some people continue to defer and let their estate take care of it later on. It's kind of an option. And like I said, it may not be the right program for everybody, but I want everybody to be aware of it and make good financial decisions about what they think would be best for them. So we're working on this. That's a work in progress, but it's coming fast. Have you checked lately for your unclaimed property? How many people have checked for unclaimed property? 1 in 10 people in the state of Colorado have unclaimed property at the Great Colorado Payback. We're holding over $1 billion in value. So we work very seriously to try to make sure that people are reunited with their unclaimed property. When I came in, there was a 13,000 claim backlog. You're asking if we're efficient. We have cleared all that out now. We've moved to a more technology-based system. We're still, again, a work in progress. We're working on it, but we've returned record amounts of unclaimed property. There's one snapshot there. If you've lived in other states, you can go to unclaimed.org or missingmoney.com and actually check to see if you have unclaimed property in other states or other countries. Last year, I was the president of all unclaimed property programs around the world. We have programs as far away as Kenya, and so we're working pretty diligently to get. So how many of you have lived in some other state or country? Aha! You may have left some unclaimed property behind somewhere else and didn't even know about it. So this is a way to go check and find out. Strongly encourage you to do that. I can give you a story. You can get me wound up and I start telling stories about this. It's fascinating. Very active in the ARPA money, American Rescue Plan Act. I'm just going to talk briefly the fact that the legislature is now working on bills to expand $3.8 billion that came into the Treasury as a result of this. It centers in three different areas: affordable housing, workforce development to strengthen our economic recovery, and mental health, behavioral health. And so these are regular bills, and they're going to work through the legislative process, and you can weigh in. You can zoom in and actually testify on bills if you have ideas about better ways to spend this money. It's one-time only money, so we have to make smart strategic investments in this, and you'll see these bills coming out very soon, in the next week or two. We do a lot of debt management. We will not always do as much as we have been, but in a low rate environment, we've been refinancing a lot of our debt, and we've also been taking on new issuances because the interest rates are so low. It's just a good time to be borrowing money. And we have a program called the Interest-Free Loan Program that we use. And, you know, school districts don't get their tax revenues or property tax revenues until this time of the year, right? But they have to start the program in the fall, and often don't have enough money to get things rolling. So we do a short-term loan program where we provide some money up front to the school district, and then as their tax revenues come in later in the school year, they can pay it back with a property tax, but they can get things rolling. And so we do a lot of work with school districts in that regard, and also the BEST program. We have $15 billion of health and safety problems around our state, $15 billion. And the BEST program is an effort to try to address some of that. You can go look at the video if you've got the deck, and you can click on it. There's a little YouTube video. The town of Hayden really produced a great video about the impact that this Building Excellent Schools Today program had on their community. It wasn't just the school, it was the entire community. So I think it's worth checking out. We've launched a $250 million small business loan program in response to the pandemic and the economic downturn for businesses less than 100 that need working capital to recover. You can go to the website, climber-colorado.com, and read all the details there. I'm rushing because I just get wound up, and then you got to give me the hook here. This is the last slide. And this is, I think that was the hook. But this is what I think you've heard me talk about all these things, but I just want to emphasize that, we're really trying to we're trying to lift people up, pay attention to their financial health, be effective and efficient with the work that we do in the Treasury. I'm focused on the...
I was just reading on my phone that we're going to try again, that educator groups are going to try again for a ballot measure to use money. There's supposedly 4 different ways that they could get money for the starving school systems to increase teacher salaries, first of all, which maybe would encourage teachers or people to go into teaching because they can't keep them, they can't get them, etc. That's a whole story, a whole different story. But do you know about these initiatives, first of all, and how will they impact the state budget, and can they be done?
And again, I'm reading those initiatives. They're going through the title approval process as we speak. They are coming from basically Great Education Colorado.
Yes, yes.
How many of you have heard of Great Education Colorado before? It's an interest group that is focused solely on making sure our students have the funding that they need to reach their full potential. And I am very supportive of this effort. It's my understanding that it's an effort to actually, it won't involve a tax increase at all.
That's correct.
What it's gonna do is just reroute money that's already in there to make in the budget to make sure it goes into the state education fund instead of in Tabor refunds perhaps.
Yes.
And so that we address this crying need. You know, I mentioned that we have an infrastructure problem in K-12, $15 billion. But we have an operational problem as well. We have a $10 billion operational problem. I sat on the Joint Budget Committee, and because of the restrictions in the Colorado Constitution, in order to balance the budget, the JVC had to pull back about $1 billion a year of money promised to school districts in order to balance the budget. So that's $10 billion hole. Now they're talking about stopping that. Yes, you can. It's money that's already been brought in. We just want to be sure it's directed the right way, and the taxpayers have to do that. The voters have to do that. Just as an aside, can I tell you a story about Great Education Colorado? Formed by 3 activist women. One of them was Carrie Kennedy. I think you all remember Carrie. Kelly Nordini was another one. She works for Conservation Colorado now. And the third is Lisa Weil. Lisa is now the executive director of Great Education Colorado. But she was my 8th grade student in Greeley in 1976. I had no idea she was grooming me to be the treasurer of the state of Colorado as an 8th grader, but here I am. But it's a joy of my life to be able to work with her because she's passionate about this work and is driving it forward, and it's a real solution to a massive problem that we have. Yeah.
You being the treasurer, pre-COVID numbers state that 50% of our students are below grade level. Is throwing money at the problem the answer?
As an educator, I will say that an underfunded system, and it has been for decades. When I was teaching back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we were kind of middle of the pack, and so maybe 22nd, 20th or so, but we slumped down over the decades since then. And if you don't fund a system, eventually it starts to crumble, and I think we see these problems. But I do push back a little bit on how we measure learning, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but I'm not an advocate of doing away with standardized testing, but I spent a decade in higher ed researching and studying effective ways to measure performance. I want to know what people can do, not just what they can bubble on a test. I want to see real student performance, and I think we're not creating an adequate assessment system to determine whether we're effectively spending our money when we put that kind of money into the system.
But if they can't read and write, does it matter?
Well, it's a very important goal, and I want everybody to be able to read.
I'm just saying, as a taxpayer,
right? I understand that.
Maybe the system needs to change instead of throwing money at it. But
well,
and I was you being the treasurer.
Yeah, I want the
question.
system to change. I'm like you. I don't want to fritter money away.
Right.
But I've worked on the inside of the system. I mean, I spent 25 years in the classroom watching and learning ways that this could be done more effectively. And then I studied it in depth for a decade at CU Denver. I know there are better ways to do it, but it does take funds to actually make things change. When you look at a class size of, I had my last year's 35 to 40 students in there, it's really hard to deliver effective instruction, particularly when you have students that are dealing with such intense mental health, behavioral health, economic situations on the outside to really make things happen. So, I want to be sure we direct it in the right way, but I know we need, when we are 50th in the country, whipping people and just saying do better is not enough. They need to do better, but we need to give them the resources so they can.
Sir?
Thank you.
Do we have time for, I don't think we have time for another question.
You get me wound up here.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hang out.
We've got
And
two more speakers. And,
yeah, we got
so
2 more
you-
speakers. So I'm happy to hang out. So let me turn this over. I'm gonna.
Before you go, C. Dolan is filming this. Dolan, I wish you'd ask for permission first.
Oh,
Do
sorry.
you mind if he has?
I don't-
Okay.
I get it.
Okay.
Dolan, what are you gonna do with the video?
Just put it on my YouTube channel and then also on Facebook, like Democratic Party Facebook page.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think anything I say is a secret.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. for all the work.
Absolutely. Thank all of you for being here.
Now, David's put these slides together in a PowerPoint, and I downloaded them yesterday and printed them out. I have one copy because it takes a lot of toner. But if you would like a copy of it, just let me know by email, and I'll email it to you, so you can have it yourself.
Is it okay if I just go ahead and shut this down?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, one thing I wanted to say in response to this last question, is does throwing money at a problem? Does throwing money at a problem solve it? Well, it depends. Is the problem a lack of money? You know, I mean, let's look logical. Diane? What?
I work in the school system for a while. One of the problems as we do this is we don't adequately measure where kids are when they come into the system. So then what happens is kids are competing in a way with kids from other schools.
Yeah, well, Dave was talking about reforming the system so that the measurements are different and, you know, the
And
whole
that's
system
one of the
needs
differences we
reform.
ought to make.
That's right, yeah.
We can talk
A
more.
lot of people care about
Right.
the system.
Okay, we have two more speakers and a couple of announcements, so I don't want to spend too much time. Our next speaker is Alison Coombs, our Aurora City Councilmember. And she's a new mother.
Thank you. And of course, I didn't bring a computer or anything to project any baby pictures, but I have my phone, so, and I have pictures on there, so if people wanna see some baby pictures, I'll hang around a little bit after, and you can look at them if you haven't seen them yet. But I'm not in fact here to show you all baby pictures, as cute as they are. So I just want to talk a little bit about what we've done, what I'm working on, and what is next in the Aurora City Council. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jim. So, as you all are probably aware, the Aurora City Council has been a somewhat difficult environment for accomplishing things throughout this pandemic. You know, starting in 2020 and moving forward, and has become increasingly difficult over that time frame. Nonetheless, one of the things that I really focused on as I was running, and that I was able to get the support that I needed for, was establishing a civic engagement commission, which we will have a kickoff on, I believe it's April 6th in the evening for the Civic Engagement Commission, which will now be starting its inaugural year. Those folks, the first 5 folks, will kind of build up the infrastructure, and then we'll continue building it out to eventually have 15 members. So if it's something you're interested in, let me know and we can get you connected to apply for the commission moving forward. And other civic engagement measures. So one thing that I'm currently working with staff on, we had proposed for ARPA funds a pilot program for community connectors, and that was not approved by my colleagues in the ARPA funds, but I am going to be working with staff on including that in a spring budget supplemental, and have worked with staff to make sure our City Hall to Go program, which will let people access city services in places other than City Hall, that is still going to happen, even though it was also declined in the ARPA funding process that we underwent at our winter workshop. And in many cases have worked with staff and with my colleagues to engage in harm reduction, right? Sometimes we are not able to do the things that we would most like to do, but we can prevent harm. We can prevent, for example, a project to be zoned that includes no affordable housing next to transit, which we know that when we're looking at keeping people housed, successful, and employed, that when we're building next to transit, that enables people to get to employment and to lead good lives, and that we need to make sure that all of those projects include affordable housing. And so I've also been working with developers on how do we have those criteria be really clear to them. So they don't come to us for a rezone and we say, well, you didn't put any affordable housing in this transit-oriented development, so we're not gonna do it. And so working with staff and developers on inclusionary zoning and looking at what kind of policy we can have for inclusionary zoning in the city of Aurora, as well as several other affordable housing measures. So working with the Aurora Housing Authority on affordable housing developments, working on ensuring that we have private activity bond funds going to folks that are building affordable housing, and looking at some options, which so far getting a lot of pushback legally, but how to address the investor-owned property issue in the city of Aurora that is resulting in very high rents and extreme inflation of our housing costs. So the cost of housing from 2020 to 2021, the average cost of a home in the city of Aurora went from $400,000 to $500,000 in that 1 year period. And one of the things driving that is that we have corporations and real estate investment trusts buying single family homes and then renting them. So people are not able to then buy those homes. In Ward 5, there's a ton of that. When I go to look, maybe I want to buy a house in Ward 5 instead of renting, I see $500,000 homes, $400,000 homes, you know, a lot of very expensive housing. And then I go, well, I want to rent a home in the city of Aurora, and I can rent the very same home that is selling for $500,000 for $2,800 a month. So, and it's always one of these large corporate owners. So we're trying to find some ways, and it's legally tricky because it can be considered what's called a regulatory taking to address that issue. But it's something that we're trying to find solutions to. In Hawaii, they had a period of time during which only owner occupants can buy a home. So it's like a 90-day period where investors cannot buy a home. When it's first on the market, it has to be an owner occupant purchasing the home. So that's the most promising of the options that we've looked at. I was looking at an outright ban initially, and that is no, that is not allowed. But you gotta start somewhere. So one thing that I also have been working on since I started in 2019 that is going to be finally coming to some fruition is addressing our trash, recycling, and compost in the city of Aurora. So we have, as you all know, a patchwork of services that everybody kind of, either their HOA or they themselves individually, if there is no HOA, determine what trash and recycling service they're going to use. That results in a lot of inefficiencies and inequities. So in the city of Aurora, many people have no access to curbside recycling and curbside composting because the multi-family situations that they live in are not required to provide that. And we can't require them to as a city. So we are going to have a consultant working with the community to do outreach to figure out what do people want with respect to trash and recycling and compost, and how do we get it for them. So that's coming to committee in May, finally, after asking for it for literal years. So I'm very excited about that. And in that vein, I'm also working, one of the things that I've done a lot of on council is legislative advocacy. So I'm working with EcoCycle and some other groups on a producer responsibility bill at the state legislature. So you should look out for that. What it is it requires the people who send you all the packaging and trash to pay a small amount for the packaging and trash that they send to everyone that then goes into a fund to provide statewide more streamlined trash, recycling, and compost, well, recycling and compost options specifically. So I'm gonna be advocating for that bill, both as an individual and advocating for the city of Aurora, given our issues, to bring that through our intergovernmental relations committee and take a position of supporting that bill. There are many other things that I'm in the process of working on, and I realize looking at this list now that it's gonna take way too long to say all of them. So I do wanna talk about some of the things that we've tried to do and didn't succeed. Because unfortunately that is part of legislating, is that you bring things forward that don't necessarily win, and you have to keep coming back to it. And so for me, the biggest of those is certainly the minimum wage and increasing the minimum wage in the city of Aurora. At this point, the proposals that we brought forward are almost laughable in terms of how low they are compared to what people are being paid or need to be paid in our city in order to thrive. So the housing wage in the city of Aurora, that is what it takes to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in the city of Aurora, is $23 an hour.
Wow.
And our proposal was a $17 an hour minimum wage by 2027. So that's not gonna work. And I think that that's an important point that people miss. They're like, oh, well, we pay $15 an hour now. Fight for 15 was what we were doing a decade ago.
Yeah.
That's how long ago the fight for 15 started, was a decade ago. $15 an hour does not cut it anymore. That is not the goal. That is below the floor of what we need to be paying people for them to succeed. So I'll be continuing to come back on this current council. It's nearly, well, certainly impossible to get a minimum wage proposal passed, but we'll be looking at whatever ways I can. Another item that I hope to be able to bring back is the Climate Action Committee that I proposed last year, and that was voted down by our council at that time. And our current council is not friendlier, but this issue continues to be more and more urgent, right? We are not having fewer climate-related problems. We look at the Marshall Fire, we look at the bizarre weather patterns that we experience, we look at the air pollution that we are dealing with, and we understand that this issue is not going to become less urgent ever. It will always be more urgent. And so I'll be continuing to work on that issue, both getting the Climate Action Committee in the city of Aurora, but also advocating at the state level. So another bill that I'm working with folks to advocate on in the state level is the air toxics bill, which would increase the requirements for what needs to be reported and what's permitted for release of toxic chemicals into the air by entities such as Suncor and our oil and gas drilling operations in the city of Aurora. And then possibly going to be able to be accomplished nonetheless, but so far have not come to fruition, are a housing trust fund and land banking, which are two of the tools that are commonly used for affordable housing all over the country, all over the world, and that we do not currently have in place in the city of Aurora. Is we buy land that can then be used for the development of affordable housing. We're not doing that. And we set aside funding that can be used and directed toward affordable housing. Most of what we currently allocate as a city for affordable housing is federal dollars that just pass through the city. But most cities have what's called a housing trust fund, where there's some money that we can kick in to ensure that that's being developed. And then the immigrant protection policies that myself and Councilmember Murillo co-sponsored both did not succeed by one vote last year, and so we will continue to find ways to make sure that those can happen, because as we know, we have a city that is 20% foreign-born, and many folks are immigrants and refugees, and so getting a local immigrant legal defense fund that can be paired with the fund that was passed statewide last session, as well as some policies that prevent our police from working together with ICE, from handing people over to ICE, because it's not their job, and it makes all of us less safe when our police or our jail are involved in letting folks be taken away by ICE and deported. And then finally, and this is gonna be another spring budget supplemental, I'll be working with staff on trying to bring back, I had brought forward for our ARPA dollars, $3.9 million ask to get bonuses for our career service employees. Our police got each a $10,000 bonus, and our fire got each a $2,000 bonus that will be paid out over the course of this year. And our career service employees got no bonus. So everyone else in the city, not in those departments, did not get any bonus. They all got a 2% cost of living increase, which police and fire did forego as part of their contract negotiations. But that did not amount to anything near $2,000. And so the ask that I'm making is to account for that, what they did get in that 2% increase, and then what does it take to get each person up to $2,000? And this is especially important for folks like our library workers who do not make very much. They certainly are not making $23 an hour for the most part that they would need to afford their housing. And so libraries, parks and recreation, these folks that are providing services that our community really counts on are being significantly underpaid and then not additionally rewarded. And that brings me to the final bill that, if it ends up coming forward, I will definitely be helping to advocate for, which is a public sector unionization bill, because our police have a union. Our fire department has a union. And those are the only two departments in our city where folks can advocate for themselves and really get those wins, get those bonuses, get those continued step and grade increases, are actually making well above a living wage. Everyone, well, there are other employees in our city that are well paid, but as entire departments, nobody else has that force behind them of a union. And so we know that when you have a union, you get results. And so I will be fervently supporting the ability of our public sector workers in the city of Aurora to unionize. And with that, I will see if, do I have time for questions?
Let's take a couple of questions.
Couple of questions. Everett.
How much money in ARPA funds did the city of Aurora get?
About $64 million.
Are there strings with that?
It's pretty open-ended to some extent. It has to be connected to the pandemic, but localities were able to do a calculation for revenue loss that occurred due to the pandemic, and so the majority, I think something like 48 million of that, was able to be used however council saw fit, because it was a revenue replacement. And then the remaining funds were used a lot of them were still used on uses that were justified based on the pandemic, even above that smaller number. But we could have spent up to 48 million on essentially whatever we wanted, because it was considered revenue replacement from revenue lost. There were certainly a number of things that were backlogs, like we have some fire facilities that are really in bad shape. And so there were $7 million allocated to that. That's not really pandemic specific, but it's something that we needed to do. And the revenue replacement allowed us to do that, even though it wasn't pandemic specific.
I know I had a chance to speak earlier. I just want to commend you on standing up for the public bargaining. I was the teacher union president in Greeley, And we actually implemented consensus bargaining back in the early 80s. I think people always focus on strike and the negative impact, but unions do great problem solving if everybody approaches it the right way. So I'm very supportive of that, and thank you for being as well.
Yeah, of course, always. And then just one other thing that, you know, a lot of times in these situations where we have a contentious and not very functional body, sometimes the best thing we have is the bully pulpit and using our voice. And so that's something that we do every time that we have a meeting as Democrats in the minority. And sometimes we also have to make a choice to break a rule for the right reasons. And I was called upon to do that recently after a decision was made in executive session when we are not supposed to take votes or make decisions in executive session, and that was a decision to dismiss a censure or to settle a censure against a member of council. And because I was just shocked that we were making such a big decision in executive session, which means the public isn't there and the public can't get those records for the most part. So it was essentially in secret. We were dismissing the censure of a member of council. And so I did speak to the press on that item, and I may myself face censure for violating the rules by sharing information from an executive session. But in my view, it was the right thing to do because what happened was not transparent, and it was not even anywhere in the realm of appropriate. And so if you all see anything about me getting censured, that's what that is about.
Good for you.
Thank you very much, Alison, for all your work. I know you work really hard. And I wanted to say, I'm a member of the Aurora Chamber of Commerce, and I'm on the Public Affairs Committee. So when people are supporting a bill, and they'll come to Chamber and talk about it, and the Chamber will vote to support it or not. And she brought her minimum wage proposal to the Chamber. I'm telling you, she was so thorough. Every possible objection you could have to it, she had all the statistics that said why it was a good idea. Of course, they said no. But it really bugged me, to put it that way. Dylan?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment about the Aurora Public Libraries. First of all, I love the libraries. They do a really good job. But in wake of the pandemic, the libraries started closing earlier. And so like I know my home library is the Aurora Central Library, and they continue to close early at 6 o'clock. Their regular hours before the pandemic were 8 o'clock. So hopefully all of you, if you get a chance, if you really enjoy libraries, it also helps homeless people having the libraries open later because it gives them resources to use the computers, find a job. Knowledge is power. So if any of you, please, if you have the desire to testify or at least, let your leaders know that we need the hours to be longer at the libraries or back to where it was before the pandemic.
And I would just add that it's not only people experiencing homelessness that are using the libraries for those types of services. Our librarians help people file their taxes online who don't have strong computer skills and don't have access to computers at home. They helped young people during the pandemic who didn't have computers at home as they were in that gap of doing virtual learning. It's also a place for people to stay warm in the case of unhoused people during the hours that they're open. They help people get connected to community resources. On the Racial Justice Subcommittee of the Arapahoe County Justice Coordinating Committee, we were having a conversation about having our DA's office work together with the libraries to help folks who are dealing with racial inequities in our justice system, people who may not have access to all of the information and resources that our counties and our judicial districts make available, because that's the kind of thing that our librarians do. So these are some of the lower paid folks in our city. It's one of the most underfunded departments that took one of the biggest cuts when we were doing pandemic budget cuts and haven't been fully restored. So thank you, Dolan, for bringing that up. It's incredibly important that we better fund our libraries. It's not just the place for books and things like that. It's really a community resource that people can.
The other thing is, it's just,
And, sorry, one
Yeah.
quick thing, also, the Commission for Seniors is going to be holding an event on April 2nd at 10 a.m., Barb, at the Mission Viejo Library. So if you all are interested in connecting with them, Barb has flyers.
Oh, and could you tell us how often and when you're gonna be meeting here at Heather
Oh,
Gardens?
yes, so our next town hall meeting will be here at Heather Gardens, and then every other month after that, all things health-wise permitting.
Okay, can you let me know before the first of the month?
Yes,
That would
I
be
will
helpful.
send you the I'll
Okay.
email you the link to the
Yeah,
schedule
emailing me
right
would
now.
be great, okay,
And then we're good.
thank you.
Thank you.
I was gonna say something else, but I don't remember what it was. Oh, are you okay with Dolan, filming you and using?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, our next speaker, and, one of our county officials is PK Kaiser, our county assessor. Most people don't know much about the assessor's office, but I'll tell you, he's made some major changes and improvements in the office, and he's gonna tell us about that. So PK Kaiser.
Good afternoon. It is really hard to speak after Dave and Alison, but here I am. I'm PK Kaiser. I'm your county assessor, and when you sent me to the county in 2018, I took charge of office in 2019. In my election campaign, I promised you that I'll bring transparency, accountability,
PK, you need to get the mic.
fairness,
Yes, thank you.
and public respect. 3.5 years in office, I'm very happy to tell you that transparency is as best as it could be. We are transparent in our assessment, we are transparent in our budget, we are transparent in our hiring, we are transparent in telling public what we are doing at the assessor's office. Our formulas are public property, our methodology is public property. Anyone can ask us how we are doing our job and the procedure we are adopting to do the assessment on your property. When I took office, the increase in property assessment was about 18 to 20% from the increase from the previous years. Last time when we received the office, notice of values, my increase was 5.5%. So we reduced the property valuation increase, not by any means other than that we counted every single property in the county. All the especially new constructions, we did not wait for the city to send us the permit. We did not wait for cities to send out notice of occupancy. We send our people into the field every inch of the county, go and check what is going on. And we recorded the property since they poured the basement in the ground. And since from their ground up, we are every 6 months, every 3 months, we are making continual inspections. So we are counting those buildings, houses very accurately. And in just last assessment here, we added 2,100 houses into our payroll, into our assessment roll actually, which brings the rest of the property assessment lower because those tax, Dave can speak better than me, those Tabor Act and Taxpayer Bill of Rights Act keeping the budgets down and check on the property taxes. So bringing more properties into the assessment roll help us to reduce the overall property tax burden and check the percentage of increase. Talking about my staff and talking about the assessor's office, I can tell you that every single post in assessor office is done by public processing. We post every single post through open channels, and everyone who is qualified is welcome to apply. We never made any appointment, and I will never made any appointment. everybody should come through the competent process. And I can tell you the assessor's office I took 3.5 years ago, and assessor's office right now better represent the diversity. We are not favoring one person over other, but I can tell you in assessor office, you will see the same diversity what you are seeing in the above streets. On the budget things, I'm very conservative. My finance degrees and my finance experience helped me to better guide that one. Last year, we saved 29% of our non-salary budget. It was COVID year, and I took 0 budget increase from the previous year, but still we managed to save 29%. In 2020, my saving was 25, and in 2019, we saved little over 18%. It is because every single time we spend a penny, I think about it. I talk to the vendor, I talk to the guy who are getting our money, and try to negotiate. In the COVID year, when there was lowest level of revenue everywhere, we were able to talk to our vendors, guys, listen, we are not getting any money, we are not getting any increase. So if we lose your service, you are getting nothing. So let's come to the point where you can get something and we can save something. And in that way, always we are happy to reduce our cost. Assessor's office in Arapahoe County is, I can tell you that, is leader in innovation. The counties in this state and counties around the world are asking us to teach them what we are doing. Last time when you receive a notice of evaluation, we put a code on it. It called QR code. If you just scan that code, it will take you to your property. It tells you everything about your property, and it also tells you if you want to appeal, here is the link to appeal. We made all those appeals online. And last time, more than 64% of appeals came through online appeal process. Because we know the technology and we know the needs of people. People don't want to come to the assessor's office in the height of COVID. So we need to be creative, we need to be approachable, we need to do things which serve the people of county. So in last year, more than 64% appeals were online. And also I'm telling you the appeals were more than 50% down when I took the office. It doesn't mean that the COVID restricted them. We opened the online, we put the drop box in front of every county building. So if you don't want to come inside, just drop your papers here. You drop your appeal here. And we were able to say that more than 50% appeals were received less than the previous year. And out of those less than 50% appeal, majority of residential appeals were decided in favor of taxpayers. We did not take any prejudice that it is our work, we need to defend. When taxpayer present any new information, we were happy to consider and we were happy to evaluate, and if deserve it, we were able to reduce the value. And also, we, out of those appeals, when I analyzed those appeals, and I saw that mostly appeals are coming from those people whose houses are not sold in the last 10, 15 years. So when the new houses are sold and we compare the old house with the new sales, the people see increase in their tax evaluation and then their taxes. So this year what we are doing, that we are sending letter to every homeowner whose house is not on market for last 10, 12 years. So they can tell us that what is their property. We can tell them that we have 3 bed, 2 bath, 5,000 square feet, this old, what is new, what is condition of your house. And in that way we are hoping that we will address the concerns of people who think their house value is shooting up. We are, also there is one thing, especially in the suburbans, when people see their property value has gone up 3-4 times, we are covering that part too, because when the property is residential, usage is residential, the taxes are lower. When the property is keeping vacant for a number of years, then it is being considered as vacant property, and property taxes goes on at least 4%, 4 times higher than that. If we are from this year onward, what we are doing that if anybody's property taxes is tremendously going up due to change in usage, we are sending them letter that you have lose the zoning or you have lose the usage of your property, and your next zoning is this one, and your taxes will be increased. More than that, one more thing, in my 3.5 years, Assessor's office not been sued by any entity. Because we are listening to the taxing entities, especially tax incremental financial districts, are very tricky. We were very close to get sued by Aurora, but we sit together and I directed my folks, listen to them. Don't tell them what you think. Listen them also. And 9 Mile and TIF. Same way we did with the city of Inglewood. They considered that they did right, and my staff said otherwise around. I said, listen to them. Listen to city of people of Inglewood and follow the law. And we were happily work with them and settle down. More than that, yeah. And if there is any question, I can better speak through answering the questions. But thank you so much for being here. All the materials are here for information purposes. If you forget to appeal your property last year, you still have a chance. You can appeal right now. I can take it or take a form, send to us. Senior citizen exception forms are there. Abatement forms are there. Disabled veteran forms are there. And just other informations are there. And just take one pen from me as a gift. Thank you so much.
How many appraisals have you done in your life
Appraisals,
of properties? You manage all of these appraisers. How
Yes,
many
sir.
have you done? You talked about experience and transparency, but how many of appraisals have you done? And I saw on your website that you don't list where you went to college. So can you be a little more transparent with your degrees, where you went, and how many, in terms of experience, how many appraisals you've done in your lifetime?
when I entered this office, I was not licensed appraiser.
When did you get licensed?
I got my license last year.
In December,
it
4
is-
months ago?
It is called ad valorem license, but for assessor, license is not required. And
So you've done none? You've done 0 appraisals?
before this, coming to this office, I was not appraiser.
Okay, so you've done 0.
Obviously, I cannot do appraisal without appraiser license.
And where did you get your degrees?
From my MBA degree, I got from Colorado Technical University, and my master in accounting I also done from Colorado Technical University.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Yeah, would you say how many degrees you have, what they are?
I have a master's in accounting, I have MBA in finance, and I have a master's in economics, and I'm working on my PhD.
And where did, because again, it doesn't say where you got these. Were they all at that same university? Because all the other county officials state where they got their degrees.
My other degree, my master in economics degree was out of states, so people are not familiar where is Faisalabad University, so
What was the name of it?
it is University of Agriculture, Faisalabad.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Any other questions? No. Thank you so much.
You may be aware that the county coroner, who will be speaking to us in April, is not required to be a medical doctor either. but they are still quarantined.
And we would have to pay
Yeah.
to have somebody do the autopsies. The Republican Party has somebody that's not a forensic pathologist, so they would have to pay somebody to do that job. That's why it's important that we elect somebody that does have the qualifications to be coroner, right?
That's right, but you don't have to have a license to be able to manage appraisals and.
But you should be able to speak the same language, shouldn't you?
Oh,
Yeah,
I
for the
think,
senior.
you, PK, would you speak to your real estate background? I know you have an extensive real estate background.
Yes, actually, when I came to this office, I was a real estate admin one in postal service, and I was handling almost entire country in negotiation and lease management, and also the profit and loss of the single postal properties.
So government, so what kind of properties?
Postal service real
Post-
estates, United States Postal Service real estate.
Okay, how many houses have you sold?
As a resident, as a real estate broker, I've been active since 2005.
How many have you sold?
I don't remember, honestly.
Is that important, really?
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Are you count?
it's okay.
Well, he brought up qualifications, I just want to know.
Yes, I feel I have a strong qualification for this job.
Okay.
Honestly, I believe it.
More than 10, less than 10?
Oh, gee.
Oh, come on.
More than 10, obviously.
The MLS says 10.
I don't know.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
all right, thank you.
You are concerned.
Well, I think you can see that PK has brought a lot of improvement and openness to the process of being county assessor. And I appreciate it. A couple of announcements. You may have noticed my button I'm wearing, obviously in support of Ukraine. I designed the button, Jim makes them. And we have some up here, we're selling them for $2 each. And we're trying to raise the money to send to Ukraine. It will go either to the International Rescue Committee or the World Central Kitchen. So we're not taking any expenses out of it or anything. It's 100% of the money will go to Ukraine. So if you want a button, we have some over here, and there will be some more. A lot of them have magnets on them, but some of them have pins on them. So you can choose whichever you want. And you don't have to buy one with them. I just wanted to tell you they're here. Okay, and the last announcement is from our precinct captain of House District 41, and that's Al Lindeman. For those of you who came to the caucuses and the county assembly, the date of it is escaping me, but it was a couple of Saturdays ago.
March
5th. March 5th, thank you. You know how we are divided up into house districts and precincts, and we have 4 precincts here in Heather Gardens, and Al is the precinct captain.
Pardon me for staying behind the mask. I've had a pretty bad virus, and I don't want to give it to anybody here. What I'm handing out is something in lieu of taking a lot of your time. What I'd like to point out is,
Al, would you get your mic up, please? Thank
what
you.
I'd like to point out is that the top 2 sentences, all Republicans need to sweep the ballot this fall is for Democrats not to vote. And Democrats typically don't vote on off-year elections. We need a very strong Democratic vote turnout unless we want a Republican-dominated government. Then down in the middle, how many of you, you don't need to raise your hands, how many of you know the precinct you live in? Right below that, at the middle of that handout, it tells you what our precincts are. Below that is the precinct organizers. And a precinct organizer has to deal with anywhere from approximately 250. So if there are 2 of them, then 125 people each. That would be a lot more manageable if we have a building representative or an area representative. And so I've got the precinct organizers listed there. And if you're willing to work isn't hard. We're talking about distributing flyers and distributing, door hangers. Please get a hold of your precinct organizer. And, our goal is to have a 90% turnout next fall here from Heather Gardens.
Does anybody need this that didn't get it? Because I probably.
Martha, I forgot to
Yeah.
mention who my opponent is.
Oh, okay.
How many of you said you're para members? Para members?
Jim?
My opponent was Walker Stapleton's running mate in 2018,
And what's the name?
Lane Sias.
Lane
And what
Science.
do we know about him? I don't remember.
He was a state house representative for a couple of
Okay.
years. He's run unsuccessfully for some other positions, but
Okay,
he does have statewide name recognition by running, so.
okay, well, I
And he's
hope.
casting himself as a friend of para.
Oh,
Oh.
okay.
Wanna warn you.
Does he know anything about that? He does.
Okay, are there any other questions? Anything you wanna see here in the club? We're planning on 3 speakers per month of 3 different levels of government. I'm still looking for a state level one for April, but we'll see. And we will have a guest host next month. Jim and I will be out of town, so we will have a guest host. Just come and be surprised. And I hope you'll support her in, you know, filling out the attendance sheet and getting your name tags and all that jazz. But you know her, and you won't be a stranger. I'm just gonna keep it a secret for business. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Some of us are gonna go down to the rendezvous and have dinner. You're welcome to join us if you want to. And, Marty?
Can I just say?
Oh, yeah, Marty had an announcement. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Right. I'm an animal lover, and I hope everybody that is here is an animal lover. There's a big issue in our legislature, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, and it's to stop the transport of all American equines going to Canada and Mexico for slaughter for human consumption.